Hey guys, I wanted to make a quick video today detailing some of my thoughts on uses of force. So this video is in response to uh, a lot of you asking me to give some of my thoughts on this, and it's going to be kind of a parallel to my mindset videos because there's some stuff in there that I talk about that's going to also be relevant in this use of force video. Now, I have tried to make this video so many times and it ends up being extremely long every time, like close to an hour. So I am trying to shave it down to the bare bones minimum as best I can so that I don't lose a bunch of you guys on this video. So with that being said, I got to say really quickly, this is not legal advice. I'm not going to be approaching the use of force from necessarily a legal standpoint, if you would. I'm going to be talking about it from more of a moral standpoint, a practical standpoint. I do have a lot of experience using force from being in law enforcement in the past, so I've been involved in the court cases. I've had to justify stuff. I've gone through a lot of those situations. I've also seen other officers have to go through that, and I've been through, like I said, a lot of cases, but I've also read a lot of cases on this kind of stuff before. And there's a lot of high-profile uses of force we see on the news and on the internet from law enforcement or from citizens and things like that. So I want to give you guys a couple of thoughts on it, and I hope that at the end of this video, this gives you guys kind of a stepping stone to realize that there is so much more to this, and there's so much to know and so much training that needs to be had, that you guys go out and get the training. That's going to be the absolute most important thing. And like I said, this isn't a legalistic video or anything like that, because things are so different from state to state. You know, you could do something here in Arizona, and in California, it's going to land you in prison, and here you get an award from your city, whatever it is. So it's just different places have different rules, and whether a use of force is legally justified ends up being determined based on the detective who shows up, how they write the report, how they look at the evidence, what evidence they decide to look at, because detectives and police departments sometimes do ignore evidence. I was involved in some things where that did happen. And the judge that presides over the case, the jury, all of those things kind of come into play, and it's definitely not perfect. There's definitely a lot of things wrong with our legal system that I really, really don't like. So that's why I'm going to try to stay away from that, and I'm going to be talking more to the moral aspect of it, what's actually going to be justified and not. So real quick, what is a use of force? Well, a use of force is the amount of effort necessary in order to compel an uncooperative subject either to do something or not to do something. So depending on what you're doing. Excessive force. Excessive force is going to be when you go beyond what is reasonably necessary in order to achieve your goal by using force. Now, we don't use force just to use force just because we're justified. We can say it on paper, and that means I can go ahead and tase this person and continue to tase them for however long. We're doing it to achieve a certain goal. We're not using force again just because we're justified. We're using force because it is a tool to achieve a goal. And that's what I just referenced earlier. So for example, if I use lethal force against somebody, let's say somebody presents a lethal threat to me, I shoot them twice, and they fall down, they drop their weapon, whatever it is, can I continue to shoot them until they're dead, even if my initial lethal force didn't kill them? No, I can't, because I've already achieved my goal of stopping the particular threat by neutralizing them, even though it didn't kill them, if that makes sense. So I can't continue to use force until they're dead, because my use of force, me shooting somebody, isn't to kill them. They may die as a result. In fact, they're likely to die as a result of me shooting them. But it's not to kill them, it's to stop the threat. So that's what I mean by you have to have a goal when you're using force. What is your goal? Now, that kind of factors in to whether something is excessive or not, right? So again, excessive force is when we go beyond what is necessary. So how do we determine that? Well, it's going to be based on several factors, and it's not something I can give you a cookie cutter solution to, but I can get you thinking about it. So what's the governmental interest in detaining this person or stopping this person? What's the level of threat they're presenting towards you, the level of resistance they're presenting, and how all of that kind of goes into play, along with, what do you have, what are your resources, what's your situation, that sort of thing. Where is this happening can even come into play too. So all of these things can become a factor in determining whether or not something is excessive or justified or any of those things. It's very much subjective, very much situational. Now, something else I want to talk about really quickly is kind of the hierarchy of use of force. You start off with kind of this level of what I would call show of force. So show of force encompasses like 3 different levels within that. The first being presence. Simply somebody's presence showing up, a security guard, a police officer, somebody armed, somebody big and intimidating showing up, can entice somebody to change their mind and compel them to comply with whatever directions they're being given. So that would be what I say is like the absolute lowest level of a show of force that falls within the use of force kind of category, if you would. The next would be verbal. That would include trying to talk somebody down, trying to de-escalate a situation, but also giving them warnings or threats, depending on who's giving it and how you're saying it can determine which legal category that falls under. Another double standard there if I got into it, but that's a talk for another day. But that would be giving somebody a warning also would fall into that category. And then the next step above that would be like actually displaying some sort of tool or giving them, actually an actual show of force. So it could be that you pull out your gun and threaten somebody with it. That would be an actual show of force, and that would be at the top of the list on the show of force portion of our larger use of force spectrum. So in some places, you could get in a lot of trouble for brandishing a weapon, but it can also be justified based on different circumstances. So you've got to be careful with that kind of stuff. The next would be entering into what is actually a use of force. So the lowest level of use of force would be less lethal, meaning it's not likely to create great bodily injury or death or cause great bodily injury or death in somebody, all the way to lethal, which is it is likely to create great bodily injury or death. And you have everything in between, and it goes on this spectrum. Now, I can't tell you, hey, a baton is less lethal, because it also depends on the circumstances how it's used. Like I said, these things are very, very fluid and subjective based on all of these different circumstances that kind of go into it. So, for example, a baton strike to the leg, probably less lethal. A baton strike to the head, probably lethal. So it just, it depends on circumstances, how things are used and that sort of thing. So I can't give you kind of a one answer and things like that. I'd like to say hands and feet are absolutely less lethal, but more people get killed by hands and feet than do by guns in the United States. So it's subjective. It's how they're used and things like that, and based on the circumstances. So like I said, levels of force that are not likely to present great bodily injury or death would be like the absolute lowest, and then the highest would be lethal force, stuff that is very likely to cause great bodily injury or death. Now, a couple of my thoughts on these different situations, confrontations, people getting involved and things like that. The first question we got to ask ourselves, should we get involved? That's something you're going to have to determine based on the situation. I would say as a citizen, a good rule, a general rule for me, is I don't get involved in situations unless there is a lethal aspect to it or potentially lethal aspect to it. Then I might get involved. And even then, I might not get involved. It just kind of depends on the situation. But that for me is my general rule. You may determine, that's different for you. But for me, it's, we're weighing risk versus reward of becoming involved or pursuing a situation. As a cop pursuing a person, there's a difference between somebody shoplifting a pack of gum and somebody robbing a bank and shooting somebody in the process and fleeing. Those are two different situations that one has a very high governmental interest and justification for pursuing this person and risking all that goes into a pursuit and apprehending this person, and one has little to no reward for actually risking pursuing this person. And I'm going to chase this person down, potentially tase them, get in a fight with them. I could get hurt, they could get hurt, all over a pack of gum. I'm probably not the cop that's going to show up and chase that kid that just stole a pack of gum and runs off. I'm probably going to go into the store, talk to the manager, like, dude, do you really want to press charges for this? And they say no. And guess what? There's no crime. So, that's probably going to be me, how I react to that situation. And that wasn't uncommon for the area I worked for, cops just to let people run away from them when they had committed petty crimes, because we had greater crimes that did occur, and we risk our safety and the safety of the public potentially, because if I'm driving a police car chasing somebody down, I could crash into somebody, kill them, all that kind of stuff. Given I'm trained with lights and siren, blah, 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 all that stuff. But the risk is still there in pursuing somebody. So as citizens, we're weighing the same thing, risk versus reward, right? We've got to consider if getting involved is going to be the best for that particular situation. Now, I've got a couple stories to go along with this. I'm not going to touch on too many of them, but for specifically this situation of risk versus reward, I'm going to give you guys one story. There was an off-duty officer years and years ago in the San Diego area. Walked in, I believe, to like a McDonald's or something like that, some sort of burger place, fast food place, and saw that it was being robbed. He saw there was, when he went up to the cash register, he saw the employee was kind of distraught, and he saw there was a guy, it might have been two guys in the manager's office with guns, and the manager was giving them cash out of the safe back there. By the time he realized what was going on, he saw that the guys hid their guns and started to make their way out of the store. They're going to flee the scene. They're going to leave. They got their money. Now they're going to leave. He decided to get involved and try to stop them as an off-duty officer, not communicating with anybody, while they, again, put their guns away and try to flee the store. He decided to try to get involved, and a gunfight happened within that restaurant, and a kid got killed in the crossfire. A small child got killed. And I want to say the bad guys still got away, and later on they were captured by the cops. He really regretted getting involved. There's no telling what would have happened if those dudes would have left the store. Could something else would have happened and they went and robbed another place and then shot somebody at that other place they robbed and somebody else would have died? Maybe they could, I don't know. But were they an imminent, immediate, real life threat to somebody else as they were walking out? Maybe not. The potential was there. They just committed a violent crime. They're armed. They're fleeing felons at this point. But were they actively trying to kill somebody while they were leaving? No, they weren't actively trying to kill anybody. Could he have waited to intervene until they got into their car? Could he have been a good witness instead? If he would have not intervened, would that kid be alive today? Probably. So anyways, that was a story that I heard in my academy class, and that's a story I want to share with you guys. What is worth that risk, and is it worth intervening in a particular situation? That's going to be up to you based on the circumstances. Now, let's say you are in a situation. There are a few things about these situations that we have to realize, that a threat can present itself and go away very, very quickly. Many schools that train this kind of thing do show that, hey, something can go from 0 to 100 really fast and you can suddenly have a life threat, an immediate lethal threat against you right away. But they don't tell you that that threat can go away very quickly, that person can surrender very quickly, that threat can be eliminated very quickly, and you need to be able to stop using force very quick. You could end up with excessive force. Let's say you're a cop, you respond to a shooting, and you get there and you see the suspect and you see that they're armed and they run from you and you chase them down, but you can't. You're justified legally to shoot them. You'd probably be morally justified to shoot them because they're fleeing felon, just committed violent crime. They're armed and all of that, but you can't get a good shot because you're both in a dead sprint, and that's just too risky. But then they throw their gun on the ground and put their hands up and turn around and surrender to you. And within a second, you shoot them. Is that justified? I think morally it's not. I think morally that's no longer justified because, yes, you had a potential threat. You're legally justified, morally justified, and then boom, it went away. This person surrendered. They dropped their gun, surrendered to you. They put their hands up. They followed your directions, turned around, and then you shot them, even though it happened in, 2 seconds. I think that person's not morally justified. Now, this isn't a legal video. They're probably legally justified because that's just the way it works. But I think as a citizen, you would definitely be held accountable for shooting somebody who surrendered to you or who ended up not being armed. Because if you don't have a body camera or you're not a cop who can articulate certain things and knows all the legal jargon you need to use in order to win a case, basically, and what words and what phrases to put in a report, you're probably gonna hang for that. You're probably gonna go to jail for it if you're in that situation. So it's something we need to be mindful about, and you really need to seek the right training. Now, the other thing is positive identification. In these situations, like I said, threat can come and go very quickly, but we also need to consider, number one, how people are going to react to us, how we look coming into the situation, how people might react to us showing up, and two, being able to positively identify that we've got our threat. It is the bad guy. They are an immediate threat, and now I can use force. It's a lot of mental steps that you need to go through before you can actually use that force. Now, I can't go into really everything because that's part of what makes these videos an hour long, and I don't want to give you guys an hour long video. We're already at over 15 minutes, almost 16 here. So I can't go into everything on that, which I would love to, but there are plenty of examples of police officers and of citizens shooting the good guys in a scenario. There's an officer a video of an officer from Northern California that sees two guys fighting over a gun and just randomly decides to shoot one. No call or anything. He was standing post, I think, at a place, and he heard a gunshot, and he runs over and sees two guys fighting over a gun. He just decides to shoot one, and the guy he shot was the good guy trying to fight off a robber that had pulled a gun on him. So he shot the good guy, not knowing who was the right one. That's a difficult situation, mind you, but it's a PID issue. And even though you have a potential lethal threat in front of you, a imminent lethal threat, you can't identify who's the bad guy. I say you're not morally justified to engage either one of them with lethal force. Could I pepper spray both of them? Could I tase one of them? And some tasers actually, you can tase two people with them. Could I tase both of them? Yeah, less lethal, you're probably good. But to shoot somebody and kill somebody and it turns out to be your victim of the crime, that's something that officer's got to live with. There's a lieutenant in the Midwest that shot his own detective who was on duty. There's multiple stories of officers showing up to shooting scenes where civilians had intervened. In one case, a security guard had actually stopped an active shooter, and the cop shows up and shoots the guy with the gun that they see. They don't ask questions. They don't do anything. They just go up, shoot the guy with the gun that they see. This is absolutely undisputable. There are cases and cases of this happening over the years, and it is horrible to see these kind of things happen, and I don't want that to happen to any of you guys. So that's what I mean by PID. It's very, very important that if you have an opportunity to verbally engage somebody, you should probably do that. Say, you with the gun, drop the gun, whatever it is, get on the ground and see what happens if you have the opportunity. If they're shooting multiple people actively when you get there, then you may have your bad guy and you may have to intervene immediately. But if they're holding on somebody like the security guard was, like the civilians were in these different situations, you shouldn't just show up and shoot the guy with the gun. You should, as an officer and as a citizen, you should expect there to be other good armed citizens and off-duty officers that are not identifiable immediately that may intervene on that situation. So you need to keep those things in mind when you respond to these situations. That's the absolute last thing I want to see is a blue-on-blue situation. Now, the last thing I want to say in this video is quickly to cover kind of an outline I have on when a certain level of force might be justified. I cannot give you a definitive cookie-cutter solution where one size fits all on this. It just doesn't happen. Everything is subjective. Everything is situational. It's very, very fluid. But I can give you some rough ideas on when something may or may not be justified. It is up to you to get the training and to go to the classes and to learn from laws and cases in your state and people in your area and things like that to do your research and your homework on this stuff. But for me, when can I use that lower level of the list, that show of force? Well, pretty much anytime you have a potential threat that is not likely or likely to create great bodily injury or death, you can show up and use, verbal judo, talk them down, give them warnings, things like that. Now, when can I use a show of force? You can potentially use a show of force when somebody is either a passive resistor, passive threat to you, or a potential threat to you. Is when you can use a show of force. Now, when can I use a less lethal level of force? For officers, passive resistors are a thing. For citizens, passive resistors aren't really too much of a thing. They could be is very, very rare. I haven't seen too many cases, if any, on those. So that's not really something you need to really concern yourself with. But when you have an active threat against you, somebody fighting against you, actively threatening you, actively trying to fight you and hurt you, but it's not likely to create great bodily injury or death, you may be justified to use some level of less lethal force to stop that attack. Now, when can you use lethal force? This is where I'm going to get a little bit controversial for people, and I'm going to kind of explain a little bit more into this, but I won't give my full explanation because, again, it takes too long, and we're at now 20 minutes. When can I use lethal force? For me, as an officer and as a citizen, I have to face an immediate, imminent life threat. That means likely to cause great bodily injury or death against me or somebody else. And it has to be a real threat, not a potential threat. Meaning, if I think somebody is armed and think they're a life threat to me and think they intend to kill me, but I don't see a gun and they're not actually aggressing towards me, they're not actually presenting the gun in a way or about to shoot me or trying to stab me or anything like that, but I think they might in the very near future, and they reach their hand in their pocket, they reach under their seat, they reach in to do something, I am not going to shoot them at that point. I don't think you're morally justified at that point. We see a lot of those shootings happen that are precautionary shootings almost. They're predictive shootings. I think he's about to pull a gun on me, and then the person gets shot and they turn out to be unarmed. I don't feel morally justified, and I don't think other people are morally justified, generally speaking, if they use lethal force against a potential threat that they have not identified as a real and immediate threat. I need somebody to present the means against me to be an immediate threat against my life and be trying to use those means against me or about to use those means against me. Simply reaching into their pocket for might be a gun is not justification for me to shoot them. Now, officers on duty, based on different situations, a lot of them are justified in doing that. A lot of them I don't think are morally justified in doing that, but they are legally justified in doing that. However, that same officer who is in that situation and uses that force, if they were to come across a citizen who is in the exact same situation, I can almost guarantee they'll probably arrest you. So citizens, in a way, are going to be held to a higher standard than law enforcement. So they don't give you the same benefit of the doubt because you're not somebody who wears the badge. And you're not somebody who's trained to say the right things, and you don't know all the different court cases and know the legal jargon and know how to articulate things and that sort of thing. That's why it's super important that you guys study this stuff. So for me, that's it. It's not just a legal set of circumstances. They have to be a threat to you. Another example of this as a citizen that would be probably more clear, somebody breaks into your house, doesn't have a weapon, doesn't present a threat against you, and is standing in your living room. You don't know what that noise was. You come out with your gun, you point it at them, and they just stand there and stare at you. Can you then just shoot them? Legally, in a lot of places, you can. Morally, I don't think you're justified. You end up with that officer who walked into the wrong apartment and shot the occupant, and she pretty much got off scot-free on that. You end up with the wife who shot her husband, who snuck in through the window of the house, and she didn't know he was coming home early from deployment, and he was trying to surprise her, and she thought he was an intruder, and she shoots him just because he's coming into the house, not having identified him. That's where, yes, you technically met a legal set of circumstances where you were probably justified to kill this person, but you didn't go through a PID, and you didn't have moral justification where they were an active threat to you. That's me personally. So you guys can disagree with me on that. That's totally fine. I respect all your opinions. If you have a different opinion than mine, I would very much appreciate it if you consider what I'm saying, whether or not you end up agreeing with it. But let me know what you guys think. This video is about 25 minutes long now, so I think I'm going to cut it off right here because I've tried like 20 times to make this video and it just hasn't worked out. So hopefully this is it. But let me know what you guys think. If you guys have any other questions, thoughts, concerns, this was a very, very just kind of dipping our toes into use of force, very broad video, very unspecific, not into a whole lot of details. But hopefully this gets you guys thinking. and make some of you go out there and get some training and do some studying. Because if we are carrying a gun, we need to be responsible for that. If we have the power to intervene and to save a life, that requires a great amount of individual responsibility on our end, which means we're liable for everything we do because it's up to us, right? So it is up to us to be prepared and to know when we can and can't do things. So anyways, all of that being said, guys, stay safe out there, and God bless.